Good evening. I'm going to open things up here. It's about a minute after 6 o'clock. I know we still have some folks coming in, so I'll just stretch this introduction out a little bit. Welcome to the public meeting of the City of Altoona Planning Commission for a presentation and comments and questions, public comments and questions concerning the comprehensive plan that's in development. We have really a final draft at this point, or a draft that is open for comment, and tonight's presentation will initiate a 45-day public comment period. So tonight, you're welcome to come to the microphone after the presentation from CZB, our consultant, planning consultant. My name's Dave Albright, by the way, and I'm the chairman of the Altoona Planning Commission. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank several of our members of the Planning Commission that are here tonight. Some of them might have questions and comments. Some of them might just be here in support. And also of Altoona City Council and our staff and so our mayor. So thank you all for being here tonight. When we conclude with the presentation, which will be about 20 minutes, I'm actually going to ask for a show of hands for anybody that would like to ask questions or make public comment. And I'll be facilitating that. I'll be asking you to come up to the microphone over here. Those will be recorded by the city staff, but it will give me an idea how to judge how much time we need to allot to everybody. We don't have a lot of people here, but if everyone needs to speak, we could be here for a while. So with that, I'll turn it over to our consultants. We have Pete Lombardi and Matt Ingalls here from CZB.
All right, thank you, Dave, and thank you, planning commissioners and city council members, mayor, and the public for being here tonight. Again, I'm Pete Lombardi from CZB here with my colleague Matt Ingalls, and what we'll be doing tonight is doing a 20-minute overview of the project, the background and process behind Altoona's new comprehensive plan. Then we'll just do a quick walk through the different pieces of the plan, key findings that drove conclusions that we came to during the process, the vision that the plan is pointing the city towards, and then walk through the plan for action, the last part of the plan, which is all about implementation. And after we're done, we'll get into comment and Q&A, as Dave mentioned. So background and process of Altogether Altoona. Many of you in the room here are aware of the current comprehensive plan, Positively Altoona. Many of you participated in that process. That was a plan that was adopted in May 2013. And it was developed at a troubled time for Altoona. While that plan was being developed, the city was designated as financially distressed under Act 47. And so that comprehensive plan, combined with the city's fiscal recovery plan, combined with some other planning tools that developed at that time, like the ahead of the curve downtown planning work, a lot of planning was done about 10 years ago that helped the city move beyond that troubled period. And Pennsylvania recommends that all of its municipalities update their comprehensive plans every 10 years. And so we're here today, we've been here for the past year to take Altoona from that planning framework that evolved around a decade ago and bring it up to date based on new conditions, evolving needs and opportunities. And that's what the Altogether Altoona process has been about. Our team was honored to be hired by the City of Altoona to do this work. We do work around the country, a lot of neighborhood plans, housing strategies, comprehensive plans, zoning codes, Before coming here to Altoona, we had done some other comprehensive plans in Pennsylvania. Erie's most recent plan, its largest suburb, Mill Creek Township, and Pennsylvania's first six-county regional comprehensive plan for the Southern Alleghenies. And actually, right before being hired by Altoona to do this work, we had just completed a regional housing strategy for the Southern Alleghenies that was then adopted by Blair County as its housing strategy. So we were very honored to be hired by the city to take on this work. We have affection for this region. And what we started last May of 2023 was a 12-month process that began with a discovery phase where we did a lot of background research on what's been going on in Altoona over the past decade or longer, what are the major challenges and opportunities in the community today. Part of that phase one work was doing a comprehensive windshield survey of 17,000 residential properties in the city of Altoona. Devin Saylor from the Planning Commission was part of a research team that we had that set eyes on every single residential project property in the city, which was a very useful database to have for this plan. That merged into phase two, where we were synthesizing what we learned in phase one, did a lot of public outreach to learn what was on the minds of residents of Altoona. And since December, we've been working on developing the actual plan. We're here in late February delivering the first draft, and we're here today with a revised draft that initiates this 45-day comment period. The process behind this included a couple of different ways of getting information from the public. We had an online survey last summer. We had something we call kitchen table conversations, where we guide small group discussions in the community to inform the plan. And we also had 2 rounds of open houses. Over 700 responses were submitted during that survey process last summer. That included hard copies completed during some city festivals last summer. So we thought it was a really great response, a very positive response to that survey. Around 150 people participated in 2 rounds of small group conversations facilitated largely by our steering committee. And then around 100 people turned out to various open house opportunities, both in July and then in early December. And as I mentioned, a steering committee has been guiding this process since before we were hired. And all the way across this process, we've been giving regular updates to the Planning Commission and the City Council. We have an April draft now that's available at altogetheraltoona.org for review and comment. A first draft was released at the end of February, and there was a public comment period for informal public comments between late February and the end of March. Since that February draft, there have been no substantive changes to the draft since then. If you've reviewed the February draft, there are no substantive changes to the draft that's now available. A few notable edits, though, have been made based on feedback that we got from the steering committee and from public comments submitted on the website. One thing was we've clarified the downtown housing recommendations in the comprehensive plan. There were some concerns from public comments that the emphasis on market rate housing in the comprehensive plan seemed to ignore affordable housing opportunities, or may have been implying that affordable housing doesn't have a place downtown, which is not the overall goal of the plan. So we've clarified that the goal for downtown market rate housing is to create a more mixed income housing environment downtown, where you have a combination of affordable housing that's there now, as well as new market rate housing opportunities. So that clarification has been made in a few parts of the document. And there's also an updated analysis of the per capita property tax levy for Pennsylvania's 15 largest cities, which is an important part of framing the recommendations in the plan for action for Altoona. So those are some notable edits. For the most part, the April draft is very similar to the original February draft. What I'll do now is just walk through a couple of slides that provide some key findings from that discovery phase of work that really shaped how the plan evolved over the course of 2023 and as we started working on writing a plan at the end of the year. One thing that was consistent from different methods of feedback, from the online survey, from open houses, from kitchen table conversations, we heard a lot of people raise concerns about the seeming increase in the prevalence of blight over time. Even though the city has been tearing down blighted properties year after year after year for decades now. And I think one data point that crystallized our understanding of what's happening was this comparison of where Altoona was in 2000 with where it is today in terms of how the number of households have changed versus how the number of housing units have changed. So basically, there has been a lot of demolition. There are fewer housing units in Altoona today than there were over 20 years ago, but the number of households has declined faster, and that's one of the factors that drives the apparent increase in blight in the community, the increase in vacancy, even though the city has been doing what it can to remove blighted properties for decades now. So that was something that helped us understand that observation in the public that blight seems to be getting worse. Based on the neighborhood or the residential property condition survey we did, we were able to produce a couple of different maps to show the distribution of good conditions and poor conditions in the city's housing stock. This is one example of a map we produced that shows average conditions at the block level across the city of Altoona. And what we noted, what everyone knows in Altoona, is that things vary pretty dramatically from block to block. And what we were able to do on this map here was point out that you have roughly 40% of the blocks in the city that are pretty healthy, where healthy properties that don't show any signs of deferred maintenance vastly outnumber properties that are showing signs of distress. But you have this group of blocks that we call unsettled blocks, where you have a lot of properties that are kind of in the middle that could tip either way in the coming decade or two, depending on levels of confidence in those parts of Altoona. And then you have around 35% of blocks in the city where the number of properties that show very clear evidence of deferred maintenance vastly outnumber other types of properties. So you have very different stories going on from one part of Altoona to the next, and that really requires a planning process to recognize that you're going to need to do different interventions at different scales in different neighborhoods. That was an important driver of the strategy process for this plan. An important cost of blight that we were able to pinpoint based on the condition survey we did and understanding how single-family home price sales have changed over the years was really identifying the cost of blight on blocks in Altoona. We were able to pinpoint that on blocks where there are no distressed homes or only one distressed home, the average sale price since 2018 was around $117,000, and that on blocks with 2 or more distressed properties, the single-family average sale price was $61,000. So that's like a 50% haircut on properties that are on blocks that have multiple distressed properties. That's a weaker tax base, a poorer fiscal outlook for the city where blight is a problem. Some additional analysis that was done during the project, we did an urban design assessment of major corridors in the city based on just basic elements of good urban design, how buildings approach the street, proportions, presence of sidewalks, trees, things like that. And what we found was that most of the mileage of corridor in Altoona doesn't have very good urban design. It doesn't send very positive messages about what Altoona wants to be. It doesn't send strong messages to the private sector that this is a place to invest and to invest in high standards. So this is another feature we have in part 1 of the plan that kind of shows the distribution of relatively poor design on corridors and where Altoona is doing it right. 11th Avenue downtown, a very clear case of where Altoona has done it right. Great urban design. Union Avenue is another example where it's an older example than recent modifications on 11th Avenue, but it's an example of good urban design that Altoona can replicate going forward. one thing that we heard loud and clear throughout the process was that Altoonans are, I think, proud of progress that has been made downtown over the past 10 years. There's recognition that there's more going on there than there was in 2010, 2011, and certainly 11th Avenue is a great example of a block where you have good streetscape, you have some interesting businesses, you have buildings that are being renovated. There's a lot happening on 11th that you can build off of. But there's also recognition that there's a long way to go downtown if you want to turn it into a serious neighborhood that has a lot of vibrant businesses, that has low vacancy rates, that has more pedestrian activity. So recognizing the progress, but also recognizing that there's a lot more still to do. One thing downtown does have is good sidewalks. The city did its own assessment of sidewalk quality last year that we were able to map out. This map here shows where in green are areas where sidewalks are in good condition, and where you have oranges and reds, sidewalks are in poor condition. And although downtown has great sidewalk conditions, overall only 36% of sidewalks in Altoona are in good or satisfactory condition. So there's a lot of sidewalks that might be missing. Almost 20% of the curb length in Altoona doesn't have a sidewalk, and a lot of sidewalks that do exist aren't in very good shape. Sidewalk condition was actually something that came up again and again in a lot of the conversations we were having. Parks, a lot of comprehensive plans pay attention to parks and recreation. We looked into it for this process, and one thing that we found was that Altoona has been underinvesting in its parks for quite a while. Per capita spending on operating budgets for parks is far below the average for cities of similar size in the U.S. Spending on capital improvements is quite low. Things have improved recently, but there's a lot of ground to make up to spend as much in Altoona as peer cities do on parks and recreation, to make that a serious part of improving Altoona in the coming years. And a related piece to that is really recognizing that the city of Altoona is pretty bare bones when it comes to its operating capacity. I don't think there's anyone would doubt that that's the case, especially after the Act 47 period. There's a lot of ground to make up in terms of the number of people that probably should be working for the city of Altoona based on the issues that need to be dealt with, and the number that actually work for the city of Altoona. So we have some findings in the plan that show full-time city employees per 1,000 residents, how Altoona is second from the bottom of the 15 largest cities in Pennsylvania, and second from the bottom in terms of per capita payroll costs for employees. It's also second from the bottom on a different metric that we looked at, per capita property tax levy. We heard some skepticism during the process that, Altoona is a poor city. It's a high poverty city. Well, what's it going to do? It can't have higher capacity, and that's actually not true. If you look at how Altoona stacks up against the 15 largest cities in the Pennsylvania again, Altoona actually has the 4th lowest poverty rate of Pennsylvania's 15 largest cities. And its median household income is right about in the middle of that group. You certainly have poverty, high poverty in certain neighborhoods in Altoona. It's a problem for a lot of households in Altoona, but it's incorrect to sort of use high poverty as an excuse for why Altoona can't raise its capacity, can't invest more in things that matter to it. So to wrap up kind of the key findings from this planning process, we kind of distilled what we learned into a description of where we think Altoona is headed if it stays on its current path. One place we know Altoona is headed pretty much regardless is that its population will be smaller in the years ahead, as will Blair County's. The Penn State Data Center released some recent projections a few months ago that suggested this, and based on the median age in Altoona, in the county, and low birth rates, it's demographically difficult for Altoona to avoid becoming gradually smaller and smaller and smaller. So a key question for any planning process here, whether it's the comprehensive plan or any neighborhood plan, is how can Altoona become a better city even as it becomes smaller? That's a critical question for a lot of communities in Pennsylvania, across the U.S. these days. So that's one direction we know Altoona is likely to be going, and it has to be part of the planning thinking. Something that Altoona might be able to avoid, but this is where it's heading right now, is that Altoona's vacancies and the share of properties that are in distress will climb on its current path and put serious pressure on those unsettled blocks that I showed on that map a few slides ago, those blocks that could go either way. Basically because Altoona has been tearing down properties year after year, but it's not tearing them down at the pace to match the decline in the number of households. So part of the plan is recommending how to right size certain housing interventions to match what's actually happening to bend the trajectory of this current path. Progress in downtown Altoona is likely to continue if Altoona stays on its current path, but it's going to be a slow, arduous road. And it will take quite some time for downtown to truly emerge as an economic force that can help in job creation and creating a more vibrant city center. So if Altoona stays on its current path, we would suggest that the downtown will take some time to get better. The same story exists when it comes to infrastructure investment. Some corridors and amenities will see some work. They'll get better, but that will probably be spotty, and it'll continue to send. There will still be parts of Altoona that send lackluster signals to the wider market about how smart it is to invest in Altoona or not. And then finally, we suggested on its current path, Altoona the government itself will continue to be in constant catch-up mode, and that this will continue to be extremely frustrating to staff, to elected leaders, to appointed officials. The fact that you're always trying to put out fires and you can't think seriously about next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and that on its current path, without some significant pivots, that's very likely to continue. So that's how we wrap up the findings portion of the document before we pivot to the vision for Altogether Altoona, which does suggest that what Altoona intends, what we learned from the community during our public outreach process, is that there's a desire for a pivot away from this current path here. And my colleague Matt will walk through those core vision components before we get to some of the implementation steps. So I'll hand it over to Matt.
Great, thank you, Pete. Let's see if I can adjust this here. So Pete, as he took you through the analysis, it's really the first portion of the plan. So if you haven't had a chance to review the plan yet and you go out and download it, that really is a good chunk of part one. So the next part two, is the vision. And it's really where do we go from here? It's Altoona's path forward. And for those of you that participated in the open houses along the way in the community survey, my guess is you're going to see some familiarity with this vision in the components that we have in here. So when we think about vision, it's really the future over the next decade or so, and it should be far-reaching, but also should be realistic. It also should try to provide some sort of guidance on things that we just cannot anticipate here in 2024. So in 5 years from now, we know that there are probably going to be things that happen that we just have no way of anticipating. We don't have a crystal ball. So part of this vision is not only to guide where we want to go, but also to help guide decisions that are just unknown, the things that are unknown. So we try to plan for the things that are known, a lot of the things that Pete just talked about, but then this also helps us plan for the things that are unknown. So you can apply this vision to these decisions that need to be made on these unknown things and it should be very useful. So when we think about Altoona in 2035, one of the components of the vision on the far left side here are a set of values, core values. And at the top, the first three there are legacy values, and then below that we have aspirational values. These things are durable. They're about these deep-rooted things that the community believes that they currently are or have been, and then also the aspirational ones are looking forward. So when we think about Altoona in 2035, we want to make sure our decisions consistently reflect our core values. So when we look at those first three, and we continue to be resourceful, self-reliant, and gritty, and then those are the legacy values. And when we think about the future, we are becoming more entrepreneurial, inclusive, and bold. So those are both a combination of things that people resonated with either currently or in the past, and then also values that people aspire to have moving forward. On the right side of the screen, we have some planning principles, which is another part of that decision-making framework. And these are the things that these principles are rooted in those values. So when we think about Altoona in 2035, it's a place where we have skin in the game. That means that when we think about being bold and self-reliant and entrepreneurial, that what we mean by skin in the game is that we can't rely on Harrisburg and Washington, D.C. to get us where we want to go. It's going to take some local resources to do that. Second one, we demand and maintain higher standards, that we expect that, we want those standards to be visible, that when we invest in ourselves, we want to be able to see that investment, and so when we invest in ourselves, we can expect others to invest in us. We embrace risk-taking and new approaches. It means that maybe doing the way that you used to do things maybe needs to pivot a little bit, and that's something that Pete talked about. And that's that entrepreneurial spirit, is finding new ways of doing things, being able to measure those things, and when they're not working, don't continue to do those things. And then also protect and strengthen Altoona's inherent assets, is to double down on those assets, really begin to build and improve that quality of life. So therefore, even though you continue to lose population, hopefully you can gain a little bit of that back by attracting and retaining younger folks from outside the area. So also as part of that vision is a set of priorities. So these first two priorities here at the top are public spaces, and the experiences they provide residents and the visitors are much improved. That was certainly one of them that and hopefully you'll be able to see the link between some of these priorities and even some of the recommendations that we're going to get into to some of the analysis that Pete talked about a few minutes ago. And then the second priority area, neighborhoods in all parts of Altoona show greater levels of pride and of stronger housing options. And underneath each one of those, we begin to outline some layers or strategies to help move those things forward. And then as an umbrella priority area is to really begin to successfully compete for young people and talented workforce. So we heard from many folks that that on one side that we need more jobs, and then we heard from other folks on the other side that there are plenty of jobs here that can't be filled because the workforce is just not the right workforce for those types of jobs. So they're looking to attract folks from outside the area. So for Altoona to be successful moving forward, it needs to not only retain that talented workforce that's here, but also attract future talented workforce to be able to make sure that as you continue to add businesses and attract businesses from outside the area, that you have the workforce to be able to fill those jobs. So that's, in a nutshell, part two is that path forward, Altoona's path forward and that vision. As we move into part three of the plan, it's the plan for action. How do we begin to put these things in motion? We've learned a lot from the public process through the analysis that Pete talked about. We have a vision that was driven by the public process. A lot of the words that you see in those planning principles and the core values are the words that actually were selected by community members through the public process. So now we move into how do we make this plan into a reality. As we think about implementation, there are a few foundational steps that we outline in the beginning of part 3. First and foremost, as we mentioned, it's going to take resources to be able to get this done. It can't be the city's resources all alone. It's probably going to be a combination of city's resources, grant resources, as well as public sector or private sector and non-for-profit as well. We're recommending an all-together Altoona fund to spearhead implementation, and you'll see some details in the plan about that, but recognizing that you got to have skin in the game, and it is going to take some resources to move these things forward. The second foundational step is the coordination and capacity of an all-together Altoona coalition. This is about building partnerships outside of City Hall with both the private sector as well as the nonprofit sector, and all working together. It can't be on the shoulders of City Hall by itself. It's just not how community building works anymore. And then also updating the zoning code in the SALDO is getting the regulations in place, having high expectations, but also at the same time being business friendly, rewarding great projects, and making sure that we zone and the regulations are very clear on what you want, but at the same time being flexible. And then also the expansion of housing-related interventions, a combination of demolition, rehab, new construction, all of that working together. It's not going to happen on one front, it has to happen on multiple fronts. So as we move away from those kind of key foundational steps, we start digging into the priority areas. And this first one, in terms of building better spaces designed with people in mind, there's 3 layers to that. The first one is create a sense of a strong and vibrant downtown. Pete talked a little bit about the downtown in 11th Avenue, is really beginning to focus investment initiatives along 11th and 12th Avenue. You have a lot going on there, but really building the critical mass around those assets and working from the inside out. One of the mistakes we see often by a lot of cities is they begin to start sprinkling investment across downtown without really building that critical mass. Build the critical mass, build around assets, and then grow from the inside out is part of the strategy here. Downtown Ahead housing program, it's really recognizing that yes, we do have income restricted housing downtown, and that should be part of the mix, but we should also have market rate housing, getting more people living downtown with higher median incomes that can support local businesses on a regular basis. And then also making sure that we have just high quality, good urban design standards to make sure that we have walkable streets, that we have buildings that engage the public realm, and that you begin to meet the needs of people living downtown, working downtown, and shopping downtown. The second layer to this priority area is make safe and beautiful streets for everyone. It's one of the things that we noticed. We've been in and out of Altoona for a number of years now, is that some of the key corridors, people talked a lot about gateways into the community and how can we improve those gateways to send a signal to people about Altoona. So we're recommending a comprehensive streetscape initiative. It doesn't mean that every street should be all things, but we've identified some streets where that comprehensive streetscape initiative should take place. Pete mentioned the sidewalk replacement. Sidewalks are generally in very poor condition. We outlined some strategies to help move that forward, including like a payment in lieu of, instead of requiring sidewalks everywhere, maybe require sidewalks, but give the option of people paying into a fund that actually enables the city to build sidewalks where they're needed and make sure that we begin to fill those gaps. And then also recognizing that most of these corridors are under the jurisdiction, at least the major corridors, under the jurisdiction of PennDOT. Need to establish a partnership and a working relationship with PennDOT. So as these corridors begin to transform, that they transform according to your vision, that there is streetscape improvements, that there are accommodations for other modes of travel other than just vehicular use. And then the last layer here under creating better public spaces designed with people in mind is the investments of parks. As Pete mentioned, really when it comes to best practices, Although Altoona has made some progress over recent years in terms of investment in parks, it has a ways to go. Parks, our corridors, those types of things go a long way to improve quality of life for residents and also future residents. More than ever before, we live in a world where we can choose more than ever before where to live. We can work in one place and live in another place. It's much easier to do that. So people are making decisions on where they live based on the quality of life that provides them in that particular location. And then also the Regional Trails Initiative, making sure that there's some really good trails now. There's some regional trails discussion. How do we begin to link those together regionally? Working with our adjacent partners and making sure that there's links to Altoona and Altoona links to other places as well. And really with this landscape here, you could become really a world-class trail system. And I know there's some other folks that are talking about similar things as well. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Pete to talk about the neighborhoods with pride and opportunity priority area.
All right, we have the last few slides here, and this is the second half of the implementation section that focuses on neighborhoods. And one of the layers of the neighborhood priority thrust here is promoting neighborhood health and stability. And the pieces that you'll find in the draft plan related to that, one is citywide neighborhood strategy guidance. This is really a tool more than a program in the document, and it takes what we learned during part one of the process, what we learned about housing conditions, about market conditions in Altoona, and it identifies ways to think about how to allocate existing resources that Altoona has, or existing tools, how to think about code enforcement as a responsive tool in different types of neighborhoods, how to think about affordable housing money that Altoona will be getting year after year from Washington or Harrisburg, how to think about how to allocate those resources in a way that is responsive to conditions in different neighborhoods. So taking everything that we learned and providing ways of thinking about how to use tools as responsively as possible, as smartly as possible going forward as possible. The second item here is a whole block method, which again is a tool rather than a program, and it basically suggests that going forward as Altoona intervenes in any neighborhood in the city, that rather than doing one-off projects, you should really be focused on treating an entire block. So if you go in there to tackle one a blighted property, what else are you going to do on that block? You need to have an answer for how you're going to actually change the trajectory of that entire block for the better, whether that's doing some rehab work on the block, putting that block in line for repaving, doing some sidewalk fixing, doing some tree planting, thinking holistically about what you're achieving at a block level, and steering away from being focused on one-off projects over here, over there, being too scattered to have a durable difference in your neighborhoods. And then a program that is part of this is the Proud Neighborhoods program, which is a tested program in a few other parts of Pennsylvania. I was actually involved at a not-for-profit in upstate New York implementing a program like this, where you have some small matching grants that you make available to groups of neighbors who commit to making small visible investments in their properties. It's really a way of building leadership capacity and pride at the neighborhood level, which is something that we clearly have seen in Altoona. When we started this project and were taking on a tour of the city, it was evident very, very quickly that almost every block has some glimmer of pride at the very least, from someone planting flowers in front of their porch, a new paint job. There's something about every block in the city that has some element of pride to it. You have more on some blocks than others, but there's something to really tap into in Altoona that we think could be quite effective as part of a holistic whole block strategy. The second layer here, catching up and keeping up with blight, is pretty simple. It's basically recognizing that there needs to be more demolition year after year than there has been over the past decade or more. We call it addition by subtraction. So your pace has been roughly 25 units of housing demolished per year, you're going to have to bump it up to closer to 40, 45, 50. That will change, year by year in terms of what's available to demolish, what the city can acquire and remove. But to sort of keep up with the problem, there has to be a commitment to doing more demolition. And at the same time, this last layer here, expanding, appealing, and affordable housing opportunities, having a program in place that's about raising the bar of standards in Altoona, doing high-quality rehabs, especially where you thinking about that whole block method, doing major rehabs on a block where you're also solving a blight problem, also planting trees, also fixing sidewalks. Rehab is an important part of this whole mix here, and another important part of rehab is to think about Altoona's rental stock. You have a lot of small rental properties in the city, duplexes, triplexes, 4s, 5s. There has to be a program to partner with good landlords in the city to improve those rental properties. Those are an important source of what's called naturally occurring affordable housing. And so a program to address that, we think, would be an important complement to these other initiatives. So the April draft of the plan walks through each of these opportunities for interventions in more detail, and that's sort of a high-level overview. And now we'll hand it back to Dave to initiate the formal comment session here.
So I'm going to ask with a show of hands how many people think that they might want to come up and make comment or ask questions or look for clarification. Okay. So, if that's only a few, and I'm not holding anyone to that, certainly if you hear something and want to come up, you're perfectly welcome. I also want to acknowledge that this has been quite a process. I mean, not only for our excellent consultants, who I think we did an excellent job in bringing on board, patting ourselves on the back, but thanking them for their work and thanking the steering committee and the city staff for all the work that they've done through this process. It's been a major undertaking, and it's really just the beginning here as we get into the rewriting and reconsidering of the planning code and all of the regulations that go along with that, which is even a larger process. So with that, when you come up to the microphone, please use this microphone over here. Give us your name, your address for the record, any affiliation that you might have that you feel is appropriate. Also, I want to tell you that this comment period is not just restricted to city residents. If you are from neighboring municipalities, feel free to make comment. This draft that you're seeing presented tonight, as well as has been posted on the city's website as the Altogether Altoona document, has been distributed to all of the neighboring municipalities for their review and comment. So like I said before, this initiates a 45-day comment period. At the end of that period, the Planning Commission will make or not make a recommendation to the council for adoption, and based on what we've seen from the commission, we're very pleased so far. I believe I can say that for all of us at this point. So just whoever wants to get up, first come, first serve. I will be probably directing any questions to other people in this room, but if you have any comments, questions, please use the microphone.
Ron Beatty, 309 26th Avenue. I'm a member of Altoona City Council. I think Altoona has invested in the redevelopment authority and the land bank over the last few years. Mayor Pacifico has led a good team to get the land bank in a good position where we can start to affect housing in Altoona. Council, I think, has the view that matches the study that, Altoona can't keep doing what it's doing. I think the redevelopment authority has to reactivate and be a driving force in the city to implement this. I don't feel that Altoona, as far as city staff, has a leader that can handle this right now. So I think we need to invest in good leadership and someone with a vision to carry this through, and then put the resources in their hands where they can effectuate and build their own team to recreate something that we had 30 or 40 years ago and it disappeared. So I think we're in a good position to re-establish that and to drive development, whether it be residential or commercial or housing, just so that we can improve the housing, impact light, and get a better outcome for the citizens of Altoona.
Rob? Anybody else?
My name's Pat Bakley, and I'm a representative of the Altoona Planning Commission. I have a question about, we said we're going to increase demolition because there would be more blighted housing. I was wondering if Altoona needs a plan to deal with the empty lots. You take out buildings in the neighborhood and all of a sudden you have all these gaps between the houses, and that affects the character of the house. Obviously, it's going to be a hazardous area. Usually people put up cyclone fences around empty lots. They could become gardens, or there could be some kind of a policy that someone has to infill that, or I don't know how that would work, but I would suggest, or I think that maybe something should be clarified about what happens to demolished houses.
So there is somewhat of a direction for that, at least this whole block strategy, the emphasis of looking at the entire block when there is any kind of demolition or something done. I know there's a whole nother level of planning and design that needs to take place where we have good strategies. And I saw something about some proposals recently from some builders or developers about how they might be tackling blocks. But I do believe that we need probably some generation of some design concepts for how to tackle this whole block strategy, especially if it's a block that's going to end up missing several teeth, or the ones that already have and are going to continue to decline. But there in the implementation part, there are some I don't want to say generic, but some more detail about that strategy of how to approach that infill and redesign.
Do you know if the current policy is the first offer of an adjacent land to the adjacent property owner? Is that a policy that the city has now, or no?
I don't. As a planning commission, we handle the blighted property on pretty much a monthly basis. We might have a couple every month. And that kind of gets to that figure of about 25 a year that the city demolishes. And I know that that's happened around the city, that, that the adjacent landowners, whether they are contacted, I don't know if there's anything proactive on it.
there are things that come into play with demolition. We don't own the properties that we demolish. There's a process that's gone through. So in the case, like, for example, if something's coming to tax sale, our land bank potentially, if it's at a certain level of the tax sale, could possibly intervene to make sure that, work with side lots and so forth. We did have a situation this year where a tax sale property was demolished by the city, and it went on to the tax sale outside because we were in the middle of changing our policies and procedures. We stayed out of it because we didn't want to complicate things, and the neighbor did buy that, and we helped them, sort of coached them on how to do that. So, I mean, we're cognizant of that, but we don't have as much control at this point to be able to direct everyone as we would like to. And it's just because of constraints of the funding we have.
So, I also direct, like, from a planning standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, is it advantageous to have empty lots in neighborhoods that become green spaces for parks, or in Altoona neighborhoods that are so dense? Is that a bad aesthetic? Is that something that detracts from the neighborhood if there's empty lots in a neighborhood? I know just like in a downtown area, if you have empty buildings, it kind of breaks the street up, and disjoins it. Is that the same with neighborhoods? Is it better to have closely dense packed neighborhoods from an aesthetic point, or is it better to have empty lots that serve as community garden spaces? Because that's what we're talking about, demolishing more and more of the infrastructure of Altoona. So I'm kind of like wondering what would be a good direction to go with that.
I don't know. Again, I think it's going to take kind of an urban design strategy, and I don't know. There's no plan I know of bringing in somebody to do that bit of work as a consultant, or. But I will say that this idea also of creating of the fund, the Altogether Altoona Fund, of private and public monies going into a fund to help this development, this type of development, would want to see that money getting used without having a very specific vision for how this redevelopment needs to take place. And just an editorial comment from myself, I appreciate Councilman Beatty's comment. I know it's been a bit of a struggle in the Planning Commission, and it's been a bit of a struggle, I'm sure, for the city staff in community development and zoning to really do our jobs without having a planner. And I think that this city deserves to have a planner back in place. And I think that's could start that process of utilizing the resources, again, the ideas that are in the comprehensive plan of developing a larger network of shareholders, both public and private, and kind of taking it completely out of the hands of City Hall and sharing that responsibility and having better communication and getting more of a community approach to it. I think that'll develop better solutions in the long run. So there's a few key things. I think that and it's really well documented, I think, in terms of the suggestions of, how to avoid staying in the same pattern that we now have, and being able to get to this vision and establish, that future city with much more positive outcomes for the community. Yes, Brian.
Brian Durbin, 3209 Granada Way, Altoona. First off, I want to thank the city leadership for taking the initiative for this to happen. many of you are probably tired of me talking about this. Matt's back there smiling, and Dave is shaking his head. And worked with the gentleman down here. You guys have been great from your team. Couple of things that are very, first off, planning code needs to be tackled. Doesn't need to be looked through, it needs to be tackled. We have to figure that out. The strain that us builders and developers have is that process. I'm not putting it down, but I was here when Dave implemented that in the city, and that was a book, and that was something for us, for a guide to use as development. Between then and now, it has become a rule of law. Where did that happen? That's a problem. We need to tackle that because we're scaring people away. We're forcing young businesses. You want to have an entrepreneurial spirit. You want to have that in the city, but we're going to saddle them with rules and regulations before they even open their doors. That's a problem. Problem number 2, zoning. As we know, zoning is a problem. How are we going to overcome this zoning? And yet we still have the word hardship to a quasi board that we can't appeal because then it goes to Blair County. That's a problem. If we're going to be able to solve those problems internally like we want to and have these public-private partnerships, we need to have the ability to do that. Those two things do not allow us to do that currently now. I know that's part of the process, but I think we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. One big thing that we're missing through this, and I see pastors here tonight, thank you, from Overflow Church. We need to give them a big round of applause for over the winter. I'm going off script here. They did a great thing for the warming center with a lot of homeless people off the streets this year, so they did a great job. But leading into that, we have a great faith-based community that I have walked into here in the last 6 months, or well, probably the last 18 months, I should say. And let me tell you something. If you want to change a neighborhood, start by what this church has done. Because they've done it. They're out there, they're reaching, they're talking. That needs to be implemented in this. We need to engage our faith-based communities because they're out there touching those that need help. So that's something else to look into. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything?
I'm Jeff Long, I'm a developer from Tyrone, and I know in one of the earlier meetings we discussed about, since there's a statewide building code and everything needs to be inspected everywhere in Pennsylvania regardless, was there any thought considered to get rid of the registered plumbers and electricians in the city of Altoona to make it user friendly? I mean, we can build anywhere in the state except Altoona. I got to pay 20% more to get wiring and plumbing done, and there's no reason for it because everything's inspected anyway. So has that been implemented or talked about or put in the plan?
I don't think there's been anything in the comprehensive plan about that. Oh, okay. Yes. Address it.
Thank you.
Yes, that issue has been raised by a few folks during this process, and the city has extended our contract to work on the zoning and saldo work. And what we're going to do during the first phase of that is do a full analysis of existing building code, zoning, saldo, everything. And part of that will include kind of looking at all of the requirements, policies that kind of are related to that. So that will be part of the zoning and saldo work, is sort of looking at those tangential requirements and how they all kind of fit into the regulatory framework for the city. But it's not specific to the rest of the process.
Yes, sir.
The thing is, Hapter, 3102 Beverly Drive, Altoona, Pennsylvania. I also have property in the city. You're all on the right track. I spent 19 years in the redevelopment authority. However, you probably will need to energize your thinking to something other than a block at a time. Because the redevelopment authority did it as a total project from 8th Street, Altoona, clear to 18th Street, and from the school, entire project, including Station Mall, clear up to 13th Avenue, which included somewhere around, for both projects, $70 million at that time to revitalize that entire area. And I spoke with some of you recently about this history. Number one, you're really on the right track to re-energize your redevelopment authority with a director, and possibly that director goes and finds federal, state, and monies to match an Altoona fund. That may be a possibility. I actually read the entire Southern Alleghenies housing project presentation, pretty much which was on this screen and is explained by these two professionals. And they really are on the right track because it's presented as an economic development project to improve codes and make it co-cooperation and city cooperation to get housing progress improved, thus making the city a nicer place to look, as presented here, thus making a nicer city a place for jobs to come to. And minds like Jeff Long's, that has the progressive history now of having developed economic progress like we've never seen with his projects, and deserves all the possible cooperation he can get. So a public-private partnership is certainly a possibility. The housing stock in Altoona, a block at a time, needs to be expanded and visioned. Because if you go into a block, knock a few houses down, the worst houses down, get people to improve the older houses that are doable, then you clean up that block. But you've got to think much bigger than a block at a time, in my opinion. So the essence of these comments are look at the original development concept of that entire core area where Station Mall, which is now a medical mall, evolved. And way back in the 80s, we asked the Altoona Hospital if they wanted to come over there and build something. We had to go another route at the time, which eventually evolved the way we wanted. So really, the housing concept, the codes concept of improvement, the vision of the city, the funding aspects, the city leadership coming together, and all of you who care to move the city into a better identity for people to come and want to stay, and rehab the housing projects now, the dilapidated housing, because it's a cancer to affect all the good housing that's left. So you really got it going. You're on the right track. I wish you well, and a hell of a lot of good, let's say. And I think you need to find a reactivate the redevelopment authority to its full strength of power, because you must designate an area, not just a block, to get its full effect of its ability to move forward with the kind of progress you all are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durbin.
I'm an old man.
Does anybody else have any comments, questions? but I didn't even have to use my timer, so I appreciate that. Yes, Devin. Don't make me get my timer out.
You know me, I talk fast. Don't worry about it. All right, if I can adjust this here, get up to height. Okay, just wanted to touch on a couple of notes because I listened to everybody's comments and stuff that they put out here. And I just wanted to go back and talk to Pat really quick just about what you were talking about with the vacant lots. And, you know, I think a challenge that the city faces is that the lot sizes, as we all know, are very small and they're very close to other households. So, I mean, putting in gardens or green spaces are they're nice ideas sometimes, but, you know, you're putting those in proximity so close to somebody's household. And I think, though, there is merit to the idea, and it's being touched on, which is what do you do with the spaces of the lots in the interim while you're waiting to develop them? Because there's a lot of vacant lots that are sitting around that, and they're not even small necessarily. They're large. There's large corner lots. I think there's one just down from Green Bean a little bit there, but it's owned, like 3 parcels are owned by 3 different people. But those spaces could be used, and maybe even through, and Ron, I'm looking at you for this, maybe the RA, is to have like a partnership where you have somebody or a nonprofit or a religious organization or 501c3 who maybe wants to adopt that piece, even though it's still owned by the RA, and then they take care of it or maintain it. They don't build any permanent structures or anything on it, and they use it for something in the interim. That way, that space is being used, and it has some kind of functionality or way to get back to the community. But again, you have to inspire community leaders who want to take care of those spaces. And I guess that touches on something else I wanted to address that you had said. But again, you know, you need to inspire those community leaders to step up and take those places. And Brian, yeah, thanks for shouting out Richard Cox back there because you guys have been killing it. So, you know, all love back there. Planning code update, you know, I agree with Brian on that. I guess more so, me and him have gone back and forth about just how deep that goes. You know, I think that you have to find the balance because the planning code should definitely have things that encourage and have barriers to poor development because you don't want any type of development to just come through into the city, you know, in the name of, you know, turning a profit. Although I know that there are good developers out there who want to make a good development, you know, you still want to have those barriers, I think, to entry. And of course, the zoning needs updated, which I've said to the mayor before, or he said to me before, and I've researched, and you know, mixed zoning that's proposed in the plan is great, I think, and needs updated. And finally, yeah, just circling back to what you had said, depend upon. I think you got to depend upon. You're saying the block approach is too small thinking. Is that accurate? I think that you have to look at it as you're taking a block by block approach. But you have to use that block-on-block approach with a bigger vision because because each block is its own unique neighborhood, it's its own unique entity with different demographic of people, different mindsets, and you know anybody in the city can tell you that. But if you work within that block-by-block strategy, and that's probably why you know Ron, you're adamant about having someone as a director for the RA. Just because you would have someone who could look at that vision long term and see that as you're working within those blocks. Because I think that what happens is when you think too big picture and you don't worry about the nitty gritty details, you start losing things. And I think that's just something I've found true of life, as many of people here have from their experiences. So I just wanted to reply back to some of the comments and things I heard. But overall, I'm very well impressed with the plan. I think it does a lot of things right, and I can't wait to see what other comments people have over the next 45 days.
Thank you, Devin. Anybody else? Well, appreciate the input. So this will, Diana, you want to briefly, okay. This will initiate that 45-day process and
yes,
hopefully...
so this is according to MPC, the municipality's planning code. We are prescribed a 45-day comment period, so that starts today. We've hand delivered the hard copy of the plan to adjacent municipalities in the County Planning Commission. It's posted online. So 45 days is up around June 7th, I believe, and so after that, we can advertise. There'll be a public hearing by City Council, so that will be actual hearing, and then consideration for adoption. We're hoping in July. It's not a guarantee. We never know. Things could change. I don't know. You never know what can happen, but that looks like the timeline. After that, then we can move forward with ordinance updates, which are we're excited to get involved with. So that's the lay of the land there.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, yes. Any comments from here? That's a good question. How do people submit comments during this period?
Comments at this point now come to the city, so planning at altoonapa.gov is the email address, and that means those will come to me. So.
Okay. Thank you, Diana. Anything else? All right. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate everything you've done so far. Have a great night.